A question I get asked often on Instagram and here on Welder Skills is, what's the best way to weld an inside fillet weld? And what I mean by an inside fillet weld is something like this, where you have to get your torch inside of a very tight area and it's just doesn't fit very well, and it's really difficult to get it to work right. This is a kit from Tigging Them Softly on Instagram, and when he sent me these, I asked him if I could do a Welder Skills video with him, and he said absolutely. So let's see how we put it together and we weld that inside fillet weld. Something a lot of people forget about whenever they're dealing with bent sheet metal parts is in that corner that's on a mating surface, you want to make sure to grind down that little spot. There's always that little bump from squishing the material over that's right here. So you just want to grind it down. Just take, that's all it takes, just that little bit. Now you'll get a much flatter, more even mating surface. Now this part fits together really tight. The tab and slots are really tight, which is really nice for when you tap it together. It holds together really good, and as you can see here, it's a really, like I said, a really great fit. And just gonna throw some tacks on here, and just I like to do one in each corner so that I'm welding to a tack. You know, nothing really special to show here, just throwing tacks on. Woo! That just happened. So let's be real. This just happened. That's really hot still. I just put a big old blob right there. So now how do we fix that? Use a good wire brush and gently, you don't have to get into it real hard, but gently just take off what you can. That looks a little bit better. So, it happens. If you do have the unfortunate time that you dip your tungsten like I just did, do yourself a favor, stop, clean up the material, change the tungsten out. Don't try to just continue on with a really bad contaminated tungsten. It's not going to work well. With aluminum, if you start seeing black soot around your welds, or if you dipped your tungsten just a little bit and you see black soot, just switch your tungsten out, because it is only going to get worse, and that's just not any fun. Now we've got this all tacked up. I kind of want to talk a little bit about how I would weld this out and what sequence I would weld it out and why. I would honestly I like to weld the outsides of something like this first, because it makes the weld, or it makes the material technically a little bit thicker. So when you go to weld the inside, which is a real pain, when you weld the inside, it gives you that little bit of extra wiggle room with your heat. So you can push a little bit more onto it and not burn through the backside, because you've got the thickness of the other weld, and that does help a little bit. If you were to go and weld the inside first, you may burn the outside a little bit, and that's going to make the outside weld not weld as nice. So like I said, I like to weld the outsides of these first and then go in and weld the inside. And also, I like to weld these on the outside all the way in one, not one pass, but one direction, if possible. When you get to the inside, I mean, ideally you want to weld it in one direction, but sometimes you just can't. Sometimes you weld it as far as you can and then come back the other direction, or go to the middle and go out. You just do what you have to do, and most of the time no one really cares how you got it welded, as long as it's welded. And you know, if it needs to hold air pressure or it needs to hold water or whatever, as long as it doesn't leak, they don't care. Now, I will say, with welding everything in one direction, you do have to watch for distortion, because if you weld everything in one direction, you gotta be careful. It'll start to lean in that direction. But because something like this, that where you're going to weld up, over, and then back down, the directions kind of counteract themselves, but the bead will be a continuous looking bead as it goes around. So just keep that in mind whenever you're welding something. You know, which way am I welding it? Is it pulling in the right direction that I want it to? So hopefully that helps, and let's start welding this thing. Almost ran out of wire on that one. But now that we got the outside all welded up, we kind of want to think about how do you want to position this so that you can weld the inside comfortably. This is where having a flex head torch really comes in head, or one of the flex lock torches, where you can really manipulate the head of your torch to be able to get into these areas. Unfortunately, I have a rigid head torch, so just gonna have to shove it in there somehow, move this around, try to get it in a position that you can see what you're doing, and you can also get filler wire in there. To weld the inside of this leg here, I'm going to stand it up on its end, and because there's a 1-inch gap right here, or 1-inch step, flange, step, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to use a 1-2-3 block to support that end, and it'll stand up nice and straight. I'm also going to use a 2-4-6 block just to put on the end, just to have something, a little bit of meat behind it. Now, do you have to use 1, 2, 3, and 2, 4, 6 blocks? No. Just use anything you got. Anything that's, well, preferably not going to melt. But if you've got, say, just a random piece of aluminum, that's all you need. Just something to stand it up as a large shim. So let me explain real quick kind of how my thought pattern is to getting in here and welding it out to the end. Because you're in a tight corner in there, you can stick your tungsten a little bit further out, because all the gas is getting trapped back there. You can cheat that just a little bit. And a while back, I did a 5-Minute Friday, I believe, on talking about torch angle to wire, you know, like the tungsten to the wire, and how you want to keep that 90 degrees. When you get into a situation like that, all that kind of goes out the window. And this is where it's really important to understand how to control the puddle and how to manipulate the puddle with real fine movements of the torch to get it to do what you want it to do, and not where the heat's just building up in one spot. You got to be able to put a little wire in there, move it around, because when you get into a back corner like this, you're actually going to be kind of back feeding it in and scooping the torch out, like something kind of like that, and then eventually you'll get to where there's enough room in there where you can start moving out again like normal. So in that probably 5 or 6 dabs in here, it gets a little squirrely, and that's where you really got to kind of flutter the pedal just a little bit. You got to manipulate your angles. Like I said, you might have to back feed just a little bit to get up underneath the cup, and you just got to do what you got to do to get it done. A lot of times too, if you're in a back corner like that, what you can do is just fill that corner in, move out a little bit, stop, reposition, move your tungsten in as needed, and then move out and then start welding again. There's nothing that says you have to do it in one run. Do what you can to be comfortable, and that's all you can do. So you get the torch in as far as you can, and you can kind of add your wire up underneath here and just get it going, and then start twisting and pulling the torch out towards you. So it's a twist and pull motion, and really putting a shorter back cap on here would make it a little bit easier. You can get a little bit more rotation, because I get to right here and I'm already touching the back cap. So if you put a short cap on here, you can rotate out a lot more before you start hitting that cap, and then you can pull it all the way out towards you. So again, you're going to get into this corner, and you're going to rotate and pull towards you at the same time. Now we're going to see this in action, and lining these two welds up was actually kind of difficult because they're actually two separate welds with the arc shot and all. But getting in that back corner, like I said before, you want to just throw some wire in there, kind of melt it around, get a good puddle going, get the heat up to temperature where the puddle will start to move a little bit. And once it starts to move and you've got some control over it, start rotating that torch out and start pulling towards you, and just make sure you don't hit the back cap, and eventually you'll rotate the torch out far enough to where it's just a regular fillet weld. And again, this is had the arc going in here and rotating out, back and out. Alright, we got this thing welded on one leg on the inside now. Now we're going to do the back side of it. And when it comes to something like this, there's always going to be a good side and a bad side to these, depending on if you're left-handed or you're right-handed. So one of these sides, you're going to have to kind of back feed about 1/2 inch or so, and then get the torch at the right angle and then start feeding out, just kind of like I did on the inside of this sidewall. So it's kind of dealer's choice on this one, you know, whatever you can get your torch into, but it's that same thing where you're going to put the wire in and rotate and to pull down the joint. You got to rotate back and pull down the joint. And that's where a lot of people get mistakes at, or they're just trying to, they keep facing backwards or something with the torch, and they're pushing all that heat to the back. You want to rotate it out, and you want to eventually get that heat to be running down the joint like you want on that leading edge of the puddle. You push TIG, you don't pull TIG. You want to start rotating it out as quickly as you can. As soon as you get some wire in there, start rotating it out. And again, that 90-degree angle between the torch and the wire, that is out the window when you're dealing with tight spots. Add this block to the back side here just to help keep it from vibrating a little bit. So, like I said, we're going to come in at a pretty funky angle and just get back as much as we can with some wire, and then rotate the torch out, rotate back and out. So see how it goes. The other thing that just occurs to me, you want to hold the torch as far back as you can when you're dealing with an inside object like this, because all that heat is going to come back out and it's going to burn your knuckles up real bad. So hold your torch back as far as you can. But another thing that does is very little movement of your fingers moves a lot out on the end where your tungsten's at. So if you're holding it further back, and you're trying to rotate, all you have to do is really just move your fingers in and out, and that's all you have to do. You don't have to like be moving your knuckles and all the, your whole wrist and all. Just from here, you know, I'm just moving these two fingers really, and a little bit of my other fingers in my wrist, but very, very little movements makes a big difference out at the end of the tungsten when you're holding the torch further back. So, might help you. Again, you get the arc started, get the puddle going, and as soon as you have some wire in there underneath that corner, you just start adding filler and start rotating out and pulling towards you, and just keep going as long as you can. Biggest thing is don't linger around in one spot too long because the heat will start building up. I'm going to speed it up here a little bit, and you can tell as I'm going closer to that other wall, the filler wire angle gets really, really steep. Woo! That one actually went pretty good. So I rotated all the way around and pulled all the way to the corner and was able to get all the way to this corner. So sometimes it works out. Not to be redundant, but it's the same thing here. Get into that corner, and we're going to rotate and pull out. Just like that. You get in, get the puddle, get a couple dabs in that puddle, in that corner, couple dabs in the corner, and start rotating, put a dab in, rotate, put a dab in, rotate out, put a dab in, and just keep rotating out. Here we've got another side-by-side shot of two different welds, but a big thing that I see a lot of people doing when they have a situation like this is they try to add filler wire too soon. You gotta let that puddle heat up, and once that puddle is hot enough to accept the filler wire, that's when you start adding more filler wire and you start pulling that puddle towards you. You know, rotating that torch out and pulling it towards you. And if you go too soon, that's when the wire just balls up and goes all over the place and it becomes a mess really quick. Coming up to the end here, gonna back off the pedal, and on the arc shot you can see I kind of swirl just a little bit. Now, another thing I like to do when I have an end where I've got to wrap around the end is at the very, very end of what I'm doing, I'll go back over and just kind of wrap those corners around, add a couple little dots of wire to the ends just so that there's no crater cracks or anything along those lines, and it kind of makes that transition look a little nice, especially if that's the end of, like, terminating of two welds. So you just kind of want to wrap around a little bit, add a little bit of wire, and just kind of finishes it off. Again, you can see here at the end where start to swirl off just a little bit as I'm backing off the pedal, and that's just to help prevent a crater crack. And that part's done. Well, I hope this video helped you figure out a better way or something you might be doing wrong when you're doing an inside fillet weld or just trying to weld inside of an area that's kind of difficult to get into with your torch. There's a lot of different ways of doing things, and this is just one of the very many ways that I like to do it. So I hope that it helped you out, and we will catch you on the next one.